morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and I was always told how to voice a radio. So today, we're doing another first. We are talking about another Pokemon for the very first time, at least in terms of the trading card game. And it's a Pokemon we've all been waiting for. It's Galarian Weezing. And yes, it does exactly what you would expect it to. Like, as far as I'm concerned, if we were all asked to guess what Galarian Weezing's ability would be, and we all knew it was going to have an ability, I think there's only really two possible predictions you could have made. It's the more likely of the two. Now, our translation here comes from the lovely Antoine Boulet, one of our very, very favourites here. And if we start off having a look at the basics, we've got 130 HP. It's not bad for a stage 1. It's about what we would expect. It's up there with stuff like Naganadel. It's pretty much, unless we're getting into silly territory with stuff like Wailord or Corporaja, it's about as much as we could realistically have expected. So that's quite nice. We got a retreat cost of 3, which is actually annoying because it's high, but it's not high enough to use stuff like buff padding or Pokemaniac. And it's got weakness to fighting, which is honestly alright. I'm borderline obsessed with Excadrill at the moment, but not many people tend to be, which means that, essentially, fighting decks just are not being represented. Pikachu and Zekrom remains amazing. You would imagine people are going to start countering it more and more as time goes by. As it stands at the moment, it's a good weakness to have. And you're a Darkness Pokemon. Now, if you ever needed to, you could use Weezing to move Darkness energy around, but we can both see right now, or all if you're watching in a group. If you are watching this video in a group, hey group! Although if you're watching it by yourself, no judgment, I'm making it by myself. I'm grateful for anyone that watches these videos in whatever way they see fit. But you don't need more than one energy is where I'm going with this. We do, however, like Black Market Prism Star, so if you've got a Darkness energy attached and you get KO'd, no giving up a prize for you. Lovely. And you are hitting weakness on Psychic Pokemon, but you're not doing any damage, so you're not actually doing that. Never mind. So what does it do? Well, we knew the ability was going to turn off abilities. The only real question was whether it had to be active or not. It does. As long as this Pokemon is your active Pokemon, your opponent's Pokemon in play have no abilities except for neutralizing gas. It's what Galarian Weezing's ability is called in the video game, and again, you could have predicted this name. Turns off abilities. Now, as it stands at the moment, when it comes to turning off abilities, we don't have much. We really don't. If you're against a GX, you can use Power Plant, or an EX, I suppose, in Expanded, but Expanded's got stuff like Garbodor, let's leave that in the rearview mirror. In Standard, we've got Power Plant that turns off GX abilities. Okay. We got Glaceon that turns off GX abilities when it's active. And then we've got Slacking. And Slacking turns off all abilities when it's active. Here's the problem with Slacking. There was a small period of time where I thought Slacking Malamar might actually be legit, might be a really good deck. I made a video about it, you can go and check it out. I genuinely thought that was going to be a good deck. It seemed like it was going to be fun. And then it's not a dramatic pause, it just never turned out to be as good as it should have been. And the problem with Slacking is multiple. It's a stage 2, and it's got a decent attack that does 160 damage, and you can use triple acceleration energy, but 160 isn't actually that phenomenal nowadays, and the energy cost, you're using kind of Malamar or triple acceleration energy, but then you can't attack next turn, and it just got super awkward. Whereas if we start having a look at Galarian Weezing, things are looking an awful lot better. You've got a single energy attack, we'll get there in a minute, and it's a stage 1. And I'm sorry, but being a stage 1 just makes a huge difference here. Being a stage 1 absolutely makes a huge difference here. And really what you're trying to do here is just turn off decks. If you're against a Malamar deck, they cannot accelerate energy, things are going to go pretty wrong pretty quickly. If you're against a Mewtwo and Mew deck, they're not going to be able to use their Perfection ability, so they're not going to be able to attack. And sure, maybe your opponent can get the energy on somewhere else, but it's going to take them time and effort in order to actually be able to do so. Against Zacian, they're not going to be able to use their ability. Honestly, the biggest issue here is that Zacian uses that ability turn 1 quite a lot, because it ends their turn. They don't really want to be using it in the mid-game because they're giving up an attack to do so, and you're probably not going to be going at that point. But it means if your opponent drops a Ditto Prism Star, for instance, it's just taking up a bench space. They're not going to be able to evolve it up into anything. It means Rillaboom decks are not going to be able to accelerate energy, and that's going to kind of ruin that. And Frostmoth decks aren't going to be able to accelerate energy, and that's going to kind of ruin that. Yeah, this is pretty awesome. Yeah, sure, there's going to be fire decks out there that just use Welder and don't use abilities, but even then, those decks are probably going to want to try and use things along the lines of Ninetales, and they're not going to be able to do so because abilities are going to be turned off. Same thing with Fione. You see, Fione would be one of the very best counters to this because it makes your opponent switch their active. Except it's an ability, so it don't work. So gut it. You can really hurt decks. Now, when you're not hurting decks, I think you need a backup. I'm not sure Galarian Weezing alone is going to win the game. Because when you can shut them down and turn off their abilities, you're rocking. When you can't, the attack's not quite good enough. Sure, you're turning off things like Dedenne and that helps, but if they set up a couple decent attackers, that could be a problem. Well, I keep mentioning this attack. What does it do? The defending Pokemon is now poisoned. Place 4 damage counters between turns instead of 1. Oh yeah, no, that's really good. I know it sounds small, but it's, it's 4 damage counters after your turn, and then 4 after theirs, and 4 after yours, and 4 after theirs. Bearing in mind their deck should be a bit slower and not quite working properly because of the whole can't use abilities thing. And of course, it's poison, so we've got some good tricks. We've got that Toxicroak that means you take 2 extra damage counters and poison between turns. Let's say you get 2 of them on the field, and they're only stage 1s at the end of the day. Well, 2 of those means 8 damage counters between turns. And this is single-sided ability lock. Your opponent's Pokemon in play have no abilities, unless they have their own neutralizing gas, in which case no one gets any abilities. It would be mean if you could turn off their neutralizing gas. That would be somewhat unfair. So this is awesome. And I think poison, aggro poison is the way to go here. Because with Toxicroak, you can really start building up the poison. Then you've got the Stadium Dust Island. If they try and switch using a trainer card, they're still poison the new one that comes in, and to the same extent. So if they should be taking 8 damage counters between turns, they will still take 8 damage counters between turns. You do have the Muck that came around in Team Up, where they don't get rid of poison if they evolve or devolve. I think most of the time I'd rather put the resources into another Toxicroak, if I'm honest. Plus, a third stage 1 line can get a little bit awkward. I'd rather keep it simpler if I can. This is awesome. I really like this. Obviously, it would be better if this ability worked from the bench. Clearly, that would be more impactful. And you're not doing that much damage. I think Galarian Weezing is one of those where there are going to be games where it does not work. Where your opponent sets up and they don't need abilities and your 4 poison between turns ain't cutting it. 8 or more if you got Toxicroak, but otherwise 4 poison between turns. But there are going to also be plenty of games where you turn off their abilities. They can't do very much. You get a couple Toxicroak out. They're taking 8 to 10 damage counters between turns. They keep having Pokemon KO'd coming into your turn, so you then get to poison the new one. And this just builds up and overwhelms them very quickly. I'm not saying this is the best card in the format, but I am saying it's great. And I think you're probably going to have more luck if this is part of your strategy and you've got some other big attacking Pokemon for when this doesn't work. But when it does work, it's awesome, and therefore I'm giving it 4 Wassies. I love this. And I love that it just matches the video game. This does exactly what we thought it would do. I think the only wrong prediction we really could have made here was thinking it might work on the bench. But that would be a bit too good. So there we go, ladies and gentlemen. I like it. Do you like it? Let me know in the comment section. Go nuts! Be nice! And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWassie, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/TheWassie. patreon.com/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all that good stuff, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can do exactly that. And please do make sure you're checking out youtube.com/WassiePlays, where we talk about a whole bunch of games that don't have Pokemon in, but are pretty gosh darned awesome regardless. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.